At first, this looked like a routine royal banquet, the kind of glittering evening Buckingham Palace has hosted for generations. The chandeliers sparkled, world leaders exchanged formal greetings, and cameras captured the carefully choreographed pageantry that has long defined the British monarchy. Yet according to reports, one small detail inside that grand ballroom left royal watchers asking a much larger question. It wasn't a speech, it wasn't a diplomatic disagreement, and it wasn't even something most viewers would have noticed at first glance. Instead, attention quickly turned toward a single seating decision and, more importantly, the remarkable silence that followed it. Because if Princess Anne truly intervened to alter arrangements involving Queen Camilla's family, why did nobody reverse the decision? Why did King Charles III reportedly allow the evening to continue exactly as planned? And what might that reveal about the invisible lines of authority that exist inside the royal family today? At first glance, this seemed like a story about a banquet. But as the details began to emerge, some royal commentators believed it raised a far more significant question. When tradition, protocol, and personal loyalty collide inside the monarchy, who ultimately decides where the boundaries are drawn? And that is where the story begins. For many people watching from the outside, it is easy to assume that power inside the monarchy operates much like power anywhere else. The king sits at the top, senior royals support him, and major decisions flow naturally from that structure. Yet those who study royal history often point out that the reality is considerably more complicated. The British monarchy is not simply a family. It is an institution. And institutions survive by protecting rules that often outlast the individuals who temporarily occupy positions within them. That distinction may help explain why reports surrounding this banquet generated so much discussion among royal observers. To understand why, we first need to understand what a state banquet actually represents. Most viewers see the glamour, the magnificent ballroom, the priceless jewels, the elegant gowns, the polished silverware, the smiling photographs that appear on front pages around the world. But beneath that spectacle lies something much more serious. State banquets are among the most important diplomatic tools available to the crown. Every guest list is carefully considered. Every invitation carries significance. Every seating placement reflects a balance of protocol, diplomacy, status, and national interest. Nothing is accidental. That is precisely why reports of an alleged seating controversy attracted attention far beyond the ballroom itself. According to commentators, concerns reportedly emerged over where Queen Camilla's son, Tom Parker Bowles, would be positioned during the event. To casual observers, such a detail might appear insignificant. After all, families naturally want to support one another, and state occasions frequently include relatives and close associates. Yet critics argue that the issue was never about family support. It was about symbolism. And in the monarchy, symbolism often matters more than words. A prestigious position near the sovereign's table is not simply a comfortable seat for dinner. It represents visibility. It signals importance. It provides access to conversations and relationships that can shape opportunities long after the evening has ended. This is where the story begins to move beyond a simple seating chart. Because if the reports are accurate, the question was never whether Tom Parker Bowles deserved to attend. The question was whether someone connected to the monarchy through marriage, rather than constitutional position, should occupy one of the most significant places in the room. And according to reports, Princess Anne may have viewed that distinction very differently from others. For decades, Anne has built a reputation unlike almost any other member of the royal family. While some royals attract headlines through charisma or public popularity, Anne has become known for something else entirely: discipline, consistency, duty. Year after year, she has carried out hundreds of engagements while avoiding much of the publicity that surrounds other senior royals. Admirers often describe her as one of the monarchy's most dependable figures, someone who views royal service not as privilege, but as responsibility. That reputation matters because it shapes how observers interpret stories like this one. When commentators hear that Anne may have intervened in a protocol matter, many do not immediately assume personal disagreement. Instead, they see the possibility of an institutional response. In other words, they believe Anne may have been defending a principle rather than targeting an individual. But that interpretation immediately creates another question. If protocol was truly the issue, why did the alleged adjustment reportedly occur so quietly. There were no public disagreements, no dramatic statements, no visible confrontation, no official explanation. Instead, according to reports, the changes were allegedly implemented through established channels, and the evening proceeded without disruption. That silence is one reason the story continues to generate discussion. Because silence inside royal circles can sometimes be more revealing than public disagreement. Had there been a visible dispute, observers might have dismissed it as a temporary family disagreement. But the absence of open conflict encouraged a different interpretation. Some royal watchers began asking whether the decision reflected something larger. Was this simply about one banquet? Or was it a subtle reminder that even a queen consort operates within limits established by the institution itself? And that question becomes even more fascinating when viewed against the backdrop of Queen Camilla's extraordinary journey. After all, few figures in modern royal history have experienced a transformation quite like hers. She went from being one of the most controversial individuals associated with the monarchy to standing beside King Charles III during his coronation. That achievement alone represented a remarkable shift in public perception. Yet if this banquet incident reveals anything, some commentators argue it may be that acceptance and authority are not necessarily the same thing. Because inside the monarchy, influence can be substantial while still remaining conditional. And if that is true, then another question immediately emerges. Where exactly does Queen Camilla's influence begin? Where does it end? And who ultimately determines those boundaries behind palace walls? If there is one thing that makes the story so fascinating to royal observers, it is that the reported banquet incident appears to challenge one of the most common assumptions about modern royal life. For years, many people have viewed Queen Camilla's journey as a remarkable transformation, a story of persistence, survival, and eventual acceptance. After decades of scrutiny, criticism, and public debate, she ultimately stood beside King Charles III at his coronation, an image that seemed to confirm her arrival at the very center of royal authority. From the outside, that moment appeared to settle a question that had followed her for much of her public life. She had become queen. She had secured her place within the institution. And for many observers, that naturally suggested influence as well. Yet this is where the story becomes considerably more complicated. Because within the monarchy, position and power are not always the same thing. Royal history is filled with individuals who occupied prestigious roles while operating within carefully defined limits. Titles can command respect, public visibility can create the appearance of authority, and ceremonial responsibilities can place someone at the center of national attention. But behind palace walls, the institution itself often functions according to rules that have been evolving for centuries. That distinction may explain why reports surrounding Princess Anne's alleged intervention generated such intense interest among royal commentators. The issue was never simply whether Queen Camilla held influence. Few would seriously argue that she does not. As the wife of King Charles III, she occupies one of the most prominent positions in the royal family. She attends major state occasions, welcomes foreign dignitaries, supports charitable causes, and represents the crown at important events both in Britain and abroad. The more intriguing question is where that influence ends. And perhaps even more importantly, who decides where those limits are drawn? Some royal watchers believe the answer lies within the monarchy's long-standing commitment to institutional survival. The crown has endured wars, political upheavals, abdications, scandals, and generational change precisely because it has often placed the institution above individual preference. Personal relationships matter, but they rarely outweigh constitutional considerations for long. That principle has become increasingly important as discussions about the future of the monarchy continue to evolve. After all, King Charles III is not simply governing the present. His reign exists within a larger timeline that eventually leads toward Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales. Whether that transition occurs years from now or decades from now, preparations for the future are constantly taking place behind the scenes. And this is where some commentators believe the banquet story takes on an entirely different meaning. Because the issue may not have been about one evening. It may have been about the future. Consider the position occupied by Camilla's children. Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopez are closely connected to the Queen, yet they do not occupy constitutional roles within the monarchy. They hold no royal titles, perform no official royal duties, and remain outside the line of succession. Their connection to the institution comes through family rather than constitutional status. For many people, that distinction may seem unimportant. Families naturally support one another, and few would question a mother's desire to see her children included in significant moments. Yet the monarchy rarely evaluates situations through purely personal lenses. Instead, it asks a different question. What precedent does this create? And that question has shaped royal decision-making for generations. If access, visibility, or influence appear to be expanding beyond established constitutional boundaries, even unintentionally, some within the institution may view that as a matter requiring careful management. Supporters argue that these boundaries exist to protect the monarchy from accusations of favoritism or private advantage. Critics sometimes view the same system as overly rigid and resistant to change. Either way, the principle remains powerful. And according to commentators, few senior royals have demonstrated greater commitment to that principle than Princess Anne. Throughout her decades of public service, Anne has cultivated a reputation built not on publicity but on consistency. While other members of the royal family frequently dominate headlines, Anne's public image has remained remarkably stable. She is often described as practical, disciplined, and deeply committed to the responsibilities that accompany royal life. That reputation is one reason why reports of her alleged involvement attracted attention. Many observers did not interpret the story as a clash of personalities. Instead, they viewed it as a possible clash between two different ideas. One idea emphasizes family, loyalty, and personal relationships. The other emphasizes protocol, duty, and institutional boundaries. And when those ideas collide, which one prevails? The answer may be found in what reportedly did not happen during the banquet. There was no public disagreement, no visible intervention from King Charles, no official correction, no indication that the arrangements were reversed. For some commentators, that silence suggested institutional approval. For others, it simply demonstrated a desire to avoid unnecessary attention during an important diplomatic event. But regardless of which interpretation proves correct, the conversation quickly moved beyond seating arrangements. Because once royal observers began discussing boundaries, another question emerged. If the institution is already focused on protecting its future, what role might Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, eventually play in shaping the next chapter of the monarchy? And could that future already be influencing decisions being made today? If the reported banquet incident was really about protecting institutional boundaries, then it inevitably leads to another question, one that may be even more important than the seating controversy itself. What exactly is the future that the monarchy is trying to protect? For years, discussions surrounding the royal family have largely focused on the present. Public attention naturally gravitates toward major events involving King Charles III, Queen Camilla, Prince William, Catherine, Princess of Wales, Prince Harry, and Meghan Markle. Headlines tend to focus on current developments, current tensions, and current responsibilities. Yet inside the monarchy, thinking rarely stops at the present moment. The institution is constantly planning years ahead, and according to many royal commentators, that long-term perspective may be essential to understanding why stories like this continue to generate so much interest. Because while King Charles occupies the throne today, nobody inside Buckingham Palace can ignore the reality that another chapter will eventually begin. The future king is already known, Prince William, and with that certainty comes a fascinating question. How much of today's decision-making is already being influenced by tomorrow's monarchy? At first glance, that might seem like speculation. However, royal history suggests otherwise. Every reign eventually transitions into another, and preparations often begin long before the public notices them. Advisors think ahead, palace officials think ahead, senior members of the royal household think ahead. Continuity is one of the monarchy's greatest strengths. The institution survives because it plans for change before change arrives. This is where some royal observers believe the reported banquet controversy takes on a deeper significance. Because when people discuss the alleged seating adjustment, they were not simply debating protocol. They were debating succession. Not succession in the constitutional sense, because nobody questions the line of succession itself. Rather, they were discussing something more subtle. Who will matter most when the next era begins? That question becomes particularly interesting when viewed through the position of Queen Camilla's family. Throughout modern royal history, there have been individuals who enjoyed enormous visibility during one reign only to become far less prominent during the next. The monarchy has always been structured around the sovereign and the direct line of succession. As generations move forward, attention naturally shifts toward those who will carry the institution into the future. Today, that future revolves around Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales. Observers frequently point out that their position differs fundamentally from almost everyone else within the broader royal family. Their prominence is not dependent upon circumstance. It is built into the constitutional structure itself. William is the heir. Catherine is the future queen. Their children represent the next generation of continuity. Because of that reality, every discussion about the monarchy's future eventually returns to them. And this is where another intriguing comparison begins to emerge. Unlike Queen Camilla's children, Catherine's family has generally remained outside the machinery of royal life despite being closely connected to one of the most important figures in the institution. Over the years, royal watchers have frequently noted that the Middleton family has largely avoided becoming central figures within palace operations, even as Catherine's role has continued to grow. Some commentators believe that approach has strengthened public confidence in the monarchy. Why? Because it reinforces the distinction between family relationships and constitutional responsibilities. The institution can welcome relatives, celebrate family milestones, and acknowledge personal connections while still maintaining clear boundaries regarding official influence. For supporters of that approach, the distinction is crucial. Without boundaries, the monarchy risks appearing vulnerable to favoritism. With boundaries, it reinforces the principle that service to the crown is different from proximity to the crown. But this is where the debate becomes more complicated. Critics sometimes argue that such boundaries can appear harsh or impersonal. After all, behind every title and every protocol stands a real family navigating real relationships. Mothers remain mothers. Children remain children. Personal loyalties do not simply disappear because someone enters royal life. That tension between institution and family has shaped countless royal stories throughout history. And perhaps that is why the alleged banquet dispute resonated with so many people. At its core, it touches upon a question that extends far beyond Buckingham Palace. Should family loyalty ever override institutional responsibility? Or must institutions survive by enforcing rules equally, regardless of personal circumstances? Different observers reach different conclusions. Some see Princess Anne's reported actions as an example of responsible stewardship, protecting traditions that have helped the monarchy endure for centuries. Others see a system so focused on protocol that it risks overlooking the human realities behind the titles. Yet regardless of which interpretation proves more persuasive, one fact remains difficult to ignore. The discussion quickly moved beyond Queen Camilla. It moved beyond Tom Parker bowls, and it moved beyond a banquet table. Instead, attention shifted toward the future shape of the monarchy itself. Because if senior royals are already emphasizing constitutional boundaries today, what might happen when Prince William eventually becomes king? Would those boundaries become even stronger? Would the monarchy become smaller, more focused, and more concentrated around the direct line of succession? Or is the current conversation being overinterpreted by royal commentators looking for significance where none exists? Those questions remain unanswered, but according to some royal watchers, the answer may already be visible in the relationship between two of the most respected figures within the institution, Prince William and Princess Anne. And what many observers believe they share could reveal more about the monarchy's future than any official statement ever could. As discussions surrounding the reported banquet incident continued, many royal observers found themselves focusing on an increasingly interesting relationship within the royal family. It was not the relationship between King Charles III and Queen Camilla, nor was it the ongoing public fascination with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Instead, attention gradually shifted toward two figures who rarely seek headlines for themselves but whose influence may prove enormously important in shaping the monarchy's future. Those figures are Princess Anne and Prince William. At first glance, comparing them may seem unusual. After all, they belong to different generations and have experienced royal life from very different positions. Anne is the daughter of Queen Elizabeth II and has spent virtually her entire life carrying out royal duties. William, meanwhile, represents the monarchy's future, preparing for responsibilities that will eventually place him on the throne. Yet despite those differences, many commentators believe they share something remarkably important, a similar philosophy. And this is where the story becomes even more intriguing. Throughout her lifetime, Princess Anne has consistently demonstrated a belief that royal status should be tied to service rather than privilege. She has never appeared particularly interested in celebrity, publicity, or expanding personal influence. Instead, her reputation has been built upon reliability, discipline, and an unwavering commitment to duty. That approach has earned respect across multiple generations of royal watchers. When discussions arise regarding protocol, constitutional responsibilities, or institutional integrity, and is often viewed as one of the strongest defenders of traditional royal principles. Prince William, according to many royal commentators, appears increasingly aligned with that same outlook. For years, reports have suggested that the Prince of Wales favors a more focused and streamlined monarchy. Rather than expanding the number of individuals performing official royal duties, the emphasis would remain concentrated on those with direct constitutional responsibilities. Supporters argue that such a model would help the institution remain relevant in a rapidly changing world. Critics, however, sometimes question whether a smaller monarchy risks placing too much pressure on too few people. Regardless of where one stands on that debate, there is little disagreement about one thing. The future monarchy is likely to look different from the one that existed during much of Queen Elizabeth II's reign. And that reality creates new questions about influence, access, and visibility. If Prince William ultimately pursues a streamlined model, who becomes central to that vision? More importantly, who does not? This is why the alleged banquet controversy continues attracting attention long after the event itself, because many observers believe it reflects broader institutional priorities already taking shape behind palace walls. According to commentators, the monarchy's future core is becoming increasingly clear. Prince William, Catherine, Princess of Wales, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, Prince Louis, those names represent continuity. They represent succession. They represent the next generation around which the institution will inevitably organize itself. And once that reality is acknowledged, another question naturally follows. Where does everyone else fit? Historically, royal transitions have often reshaped the prominence of entire branches of the family. Individuals who occupied highly visible positions during one reign sometimes found themselves much further from the center during the next. It is not necessarily a punishment, nor is it always the result of personal disagreements. Often, it is simply the natural consequence of succession. The monarchy follows the crown, and the crown follows the line of succession. That principle has guided royal history for centuries. For Queen Camilla, this reality may be especially significant. While she currently occupies one of the most prominent positions within the royal family, commentators frequently note that her role differs fundamentally from that of Catherine, Princess of Wales. Catherine's future role is directly tied to the continuation of the monarchy itself. She is expected to become queen when Prince William ascends the throne. Camilla's position, however, is connected to the reign of King Charles III. That distinction may seem subtle, but within royal circles it carries enormous significance. Because when reigns change, influence often changes with them. This does not mean Queen Camilla will suddenly disappear from royal life. Far from it. She has spent years establishing herself as a respected and visible member of the royal family. Yet constitutional realities ensure that attention will increasingly shift toward the next generation. Some royal watchers believe that shift has already begun. Not publicly, not dramatically, but gradually. And that possibility makes the reported banquet incident appear less like an isolated event and more like a symbol of larger institutional trends. Could Princess Anne's reported actions have reflected concerns about preserving those future priorities? Could they have been intended as a reminder that proximity to the monarchy is not the same thing as constitutional importance? Or are commentators simply reading too much into a routine matter of protocol? The truth remains difficult to determine. What is clear, however, is that discussions about the monarchy's future are becoming increasingly impossible to avoid. King Charles III continues to carry out his duties. Queen Camilla continues to support the crown. Yet the public conversation is increasingly focused on what comes next. And nowhere is that future more visible than in the growing prominence of Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales. But while succession may explain part of a story, another question remains unanswered. If institutional boundaries are becoming more important, and if the monarchy is already preparing for its next chapter, what does that mean for Queen Camilla herself? Because the most revealing aspect of this entire story may not concern her son, the seating arrangements, or even Princess Anne. It may concern what happens when the reign of King Charles eventually gives way to a completely new royal era. As fascinating as the reported banquet controversy may be, perhaps the most revealing aspect of the entire discussion has nothing to do with seating charts, empty chairs, or even Princess Anne herself. Instead, it centers on a much larger question that has quietly followed Queen Camilla throughout her years in royal life. What happens when the reign changes? For decades, Camilla's story has been one of persistence. Few figures in modern royal history have faced a more difficult path to public acceptance. Long before she became queen, she was the subject of intense scrutiny, fierce criticism, and endless debate. Yet over time, public attitudes gradually softened. Her commitment to supporting King Charles III became increasingly visible, and many observers came to view her as a stabilizing presence within the monarchy. By the time of the coronation, the transformation seemed extraordinary. The woman, once considered one of the most controversial figures connected to the royal family, was now standing beside the king, wearing the crown and participating in one of the most historic ceremonies of the modern era. To many people, that moment appeared to represent the end of a long journey. But according to some royal commentators, it may actually have marked the beginning of a different challenge altogether. Because acceptance and permanence are not necessarily the same thing. And that distinction matters enormously within a monarchy built around succession. Unlike sovereigns, heirs, and future heirs, the position of queen consort exists within a specific reign. Its influence is connected to the monarch it supports. While the role carries immense prestige, visibility, and importance, it does not create an independent branch of royal authority that automatically continues into the next generation. That reality helps explain why discussions about Queen Camilla's family continue to attract attention. Her son, Tom Parker Bowles, and her daughter, Laura Lopez, have never been working royals. They have never held royal titles. They have never occupied positions within the constitutional framework of the crown. Their connection to royal life comes through their relationship with their mother rather than through succession or official responsibility. For years, that arrangement has largely worked without controversy. Yet stories such as the reported banquet incident inevitably bring those distinctions back into public conversation, because they force observers to consider a difficult question. When Prince William eventually becomes king, how much of the current royal structure will remain unchanged? Many royal watchers believe William's reign will place even greater emphasis on a focused monarchy centered around those directly responsible for carrying the institution forward. Under that model, attention would naturally concentrate on William, Catherine, Princess of Wales, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis. Not because of personal preference, not because of family politics, but because constitutional realities point in that direction. This is one reason some commentators believe the alleged banquet incident resonated so strongly with royal audiences. The story appeared to symbolize something larger than a disagreement over protocol. It symbolized the difference between proximity and permanence. Someone can stand very close to the center of royal life and still remain outside the institution's long-term structure. That distinction has existed throughout royal history, and according to supporters of Princess Anne's approach, preserving that distinction is essential to maintaining public confidence in the monarchy. If the institution begins to blur those lines, critics could argue that influence is being distributed through personal relationships rather than constitutional responsibility. If the lines remain clear, supporters argue that the monarchy protects the very principles that have allowed it to survive for generations. Of course, not everyone interprets the situation in the same way. Some observers believe stories like this are often exaggerated, transformed into symbols of larger struggles that may not actually exist. Others argue that palace decisions frequently carry more meaning than officials are willing to acknowledge publicly. That uncertainty is precisely what keeps the discussion alive, because without official confirmation, people are left interpreting signals, gestures, and reported events through their own understanding of how the monarchy operates. And perhaps that is why the image of that reportedly empty chair has remained so powerful. Not because of who did or did not sit there, but because of what many people believe it represented. To some, it was a reminder that the crown remains larger than any individual. To others, it reflected the difficult balance between family loyalty and institutional duty. And to still others, it offered a glimpse into how the future monarchy may already be taking shape behind the scenes. Whatever interpretation proves closest to reality, one conclusion appears difficult to avoid. The story was never really about a chair. It was about boundaries. Who creates them? Who enforces them? And who must ultimately accept them? Outro. When all is said and done, the central mystery remains remarkably simple. Was this merely a routine matter of royal protocol that attracted more attention than it deserved? Or did it reveal something meaningful about the balance of power inside today's royal family? Some commentators believe Princess Anne's reported actions demonstrated the monarchy's enduring commitment to duty, tradition, and institutional discipline. Others see a more complex picture, one in which Queen Camilla continues navigating the unique challenges that come with occupying one of the most visible yet constitutionally limited positions in royal life. What makes the story so compelling is that both interpretations contain elements worth considering. After all, the monarchy has always been a blend of family and institution, personal relationships and public responsibilities, emotion and protocol. And perhaps that tension will never fully disappear. As King Charles III continues his reign, as Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, prepare for the future, and as the next generation gradually moves closer to the center of royal life, questions about influence, succession, and authority are unlikely to fade anytime soon. But what do you think? Was the reported banquet incident simply an example of protocol being followed exactly as intended? Or did it point to something much larger happening behind palace walls? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy thoughtful royal documentaries that go beyond the headlines to explore the deeper stories shaping the monarchy, be sure to subscribe and join us for the next discussion.